Hi there, lovely people. It's me, Ryan Burns, DB Cooper Sleuth, and today I'm going to be doing a reaction video to a video that's been posted on my page, on my Facebook group, the official DB Cooper group, a couple of times now. This is a criminal profile of DB Cooper, so I really like that. So, something I'm interested in for sure. So this is by a lady named Pat Brown. I don't know who this is, but she has 70,000 subscribers. I guess she is a criminal profiler. And yeah, so now this is 2.5 hours long. So it sounds kind of like my live streams. So I wouldn't expect anybody to do a reaction to my live streams that are that long, but I'm going to be doing a reaction to this, and now it will be spliced up a good bit because of its length. So I suppose I may just be interrupting when there's a point of disagreement with Miss Brown. So anyway, this is really interesting. So I'm pretty excited to get into this. So we're going to jump right in. And yes, I am very pedantic on these reactions. So forgive me for being, well, actually guy. No one likes the, well, actually guy. But I'm going to be that guy. So we'll see. But maybe I won't have any points of disagreement with her. And this reaction will be 5 minutes long. But I will link the video, the full length video below. But let's dive in now.
But anyway, all right, let's get to what I want to point about, which is there's a great, pretty good on Max, which is HBO, The Mystery of DB Cooper. This is a documentary which I highly recommend.
Yeah, that's probably the best one. Of any of the documentaries out there, I would say that's probably the best one, just in general, to watch. It's not pushing a particular suspect. It's not, the Netflix show or the History Channel show that was kind of pushing Rackstraw. This one's not pushing anybody. Very fair. I believe a British company made it. So yeah, the one on Max is probably the best DB Cooper hour-and-a-half documentary out there.
I enjoyed it. And I'm very critical about a lot of documentaries because, first of all, they often have an agenda, they're highly biased, and they're boring. And this one was actually really good. I enjoyed it. There is another one which I did not bother to watch because it was a series and it got really bad reviews. And that was on Netflix, DB Cooper, Where Are You? I just didn't have the energy. So I didn't watch that. Oh, sorry. See, everything's out of order. I'll get to that in a minute. So those are the two main documentaries if you want to watch something about it. You can go on YouTube and there's a massive amount of documentaries or YouTube shows on this case because everybody's fascinated with it because it's never been solved. So you can find that. You can also find some books. I hear there's a book by a fellow named Edwards. His last name is Edwards. I think it's like not available on Kindle, so it's like $70 or something if you want to get it. I didn't feel a need to spend that kind of money, but there are a couple other books out there. Here's one fellow. Let's see, who are the fellows? Here's one fellow, Jeffrey Gray. He wrote Skyjack: The Hunt for DB Cooper. He got like into all the records and everything. It's a very huge book, I guess. It didn't get a lot of rave reviews, so I don't know if this guy, just
I don't know about that, Pat. Skyjack is really the only successful Cooper book out there, honestly, that's made money. Skyjack's pretty good, actually.
He was obsessing about it and just had way too much information. But I'll point it out. And there's this fella, Bruce Smith. People tend to like his book a little bit better, author of DB Cooper and the FBI. Hey, he's an unusual character. He lives in this house.
Not anymore.
Kind of an obsessive and curious character. I'd like to have beer with him. I would. I think he sounds like he'd be fun.
He is.
But I did not read his book either. So I stuck with pretty much the HBO documentary and the FBI files and other information from Citizen Sleuths to gather up enough of what I needed to do with the show. And what I want to do with this show is obviously, if nobody solved the case, Pat Brown much as I'm a brilliant criminal profiler, probably not going to solve this case either. I'm not looking at the people and go, oh my God, it's that guy. I can't say that. As a matter of fact, I'm not even sure any of the suspects that there have been out there are even the right people. I mean, there's been a ridiculous amount, like this, an insane amount of suspects. And then there's been the favorite suspects. Apparently, there's been the FBI or others have narrowed it down to about 20 people. But I don't think those 20 people match either. And so I'm going to take you along on a profiling journey. I'm going to have you profile along with me and have you also say, what do you see when I say, hey, here's an issue? What do you actually see? What do you see as the problem with this? And what do you think we should be looking at? Now, I'm basing things on evidence as opposed to, hey, this looks like a cool guy. Let me see if I can make him into DB Cooper. I want to look at the evidence and say, what does the evidence tell us about who DB Cooper is and who he is not? So I think this is very important. And so we're going to go on this little profiling journey together. But he did come on with it. But this is an important point. He came on with a briefcase. Okay. I'm going to get to the briefcase issue in a minute. But he sat down with that briefcase and he showed the flight attendant. He said, look, I got a bomb. And he opened it up. Now, this is really important to me. He said he opened a briefcase showing a bomb to the flight attendant, and it was wires and a bunch of some red sticks. One of the questions is, was he showing a real bomb? And I think the answer is absolutely not. I don't think he had bomb skills, bomb making skills. And I don't believe he showed it to her very long. I think he went like this. This is important because if he didn't have a real bomb, first of all, he wasn't intending to hurt anyone. And one of the things I find in his character is that he doesn't seem to want to harm people, which is interesting because some people don't give a crap who they hurt in the commission of crime. He seemed to actually not want to hurt anybody. I don't believe he had a real bomb in the case. And one of the more important things to me is if he had a fake bomb, which they're describing as just being, which she describes as a bunch of wires and some red sticks. Now, but let me show you some pictures of, if I can find them, pictures of here they are. This is the crew. This is who ended up on the plane when he jumped out of the plane. There was a pilot, the co-pilot. I forgot who the third dude was. And then she was Tina Mucklow. She was a stewardess, and she really very brave woman. And he had her sit down next to him. And he said, "Look, this is what I got here." And she was the one who had to bring notes to the captain and all that stuff. And she was like in the middle of it. And so she saw the bomb. I mean, she's a young woman. What does she know bombs? I mean, I don't know anything about bombs.
So about the bomb, yeah, this is a topic that is debatable. The thing about the bomb, though, is that a couple things. Tina's father was an electrician. She was a pretty astute student of wires and gadgets and things. And the bomb was not shown to her briefly, nor was it shown to the first flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, briefly. I mean, he explained how it worked even. He said, look, this is this wire here. He said, all I have to do is attach this wire here to this gadget here, and we'll all be dead, which was a battery. And in fact, the way that the bomb was actually described has been recreated and would have been a bad day if it had been real. Dynamite was not hard to find back then. You could buy it at hardware stores. There's a news story from 1970 where a couple went into it's an expose where a couple went into a Michigan hardware store and bought a dozen sticks of dynamite for about $3. So you could easily buy it back then. I mean, I don't know if it was real or not, but he made a very convincing bomb because some bomb ordnance people have recreated the bomb as described by Tina, which was wires attached to a battery, attached to dynamite sticks, etc. And yeah, a big battery back then, Tina called it a flashlight battery, had enough amperes or whatever it's going to be volts to bust blasting caps if it had been connected. So now granted, I mean, he didn't need the bomb to be real. I mean, most hijackers at the time would just say, I have a bomb, and nobody's going to call their bluff on it because the consequences of calling the bluff on a fake bomb are not good, not worth it, really. So his bomb didn't need to be real, but having studied other hijackers at the time, sometimes they had a shoebox with like cloth in it or just odd screwdrivers and things in there. You know, Cooper's bomb is easily the most elaborate fake out there. It looked convincing enough, and it didn't need to be convincing. But it would have worked. But I just don't. Yeah, I mean, I would lean toward it being fake generally, but it's not something we can dismiss because she didn't see it, because she did see it well enough to remember which wires, colored wires went where and things. She remembered it well enough, and it was a menacing looking device, more than it needed to be. So there's that.
I don't believe it was a real bomb. So when I look back at this case, I just want to say, if it wasn't a real bomb, then it's highly likely that it was a thin layer of some whatever red sticks he had and some wires. And underneath that, he had room to put other things. And I think one of the things they say about this guy is when he jumped out of the plane, he's wearing a suit and some shoes that weren't suitable for landing on the ground and then hiking through any area. First of all, I think the shoes, she looked down, saw some shoes that were not loafers. They were up to over his ankles. So I don't know what she saw. She could have actually seen some hiking boots that were, just not so obvious. Some kind of shoe that was solid enough for him to land on and walk away with and walk around in. But also he was only wearing a suit. It was kind of cold when he jumped out of the plane.
He was also wearing a rain jacket, like an overcoat, essentially. So it wasn't just a suit.
Depending on where he landed, he might have to walk for quite a long time. Would he freeze to death, get hypothermia?
No.
Or did he have some kind of long johns under?
It wasn't even freezing outside. It was 42 or 44 degrees. I forget which one, but it was 42 or 44 degrees on the ground at the time of his jump, where he approximately jumped. So he wasn't going to freeze to death for sure.
Underneath his clothing? Did he have extra clothing in that briefcase underneath the bomb?
Well, let's not forget. Okay, so Pat's forgetting the mystery bag, right? I mean, that's where these items would have been kept. He had another bag with him that had items that were not used in the hijacking. So whatever those things were inside the mystery bag were used for his escape or for his jump. So we just don't know what those were. Very critical to know what was in the mystery bag.
That could have, gloves, hat, all that kind of stuff that could have assisted him in surviving a longer time. I don't see much written about that, that the briefcase may have held more useful items than anybody really wants to talk about. So that's a suitcase thing. So anyway, he had that, showed her this bomb, and then he hijacked the plane. When the plane landed in Seattle, where he demanded $200,000 in cash, which was over $1 million in those days, but would be $1 million today. So $200,000 wasn't a small amount; it was huge. He asked for 4 parachutes, and the reason he asked for 4 parachutes was he wanted to be sure he got some parachutes that were working, and he wanted to make them think he might be taking hostages, like somebody was going to go with him. How the double, you jump and you have 2 people, because he wanted to make sure they didn't just give him 4 bad parachutes or give him a bad parachute and he just jumps out. It's like, that happens. Wow, dang it. He wanted to make sure that they wouldn't screw him. So he made it look like he was going to take hostages, and therefore they better give him some decent parachutes. And so he also asked for food for the crew, which is interesting. Again, he doesn't seem to be a mean fellow or uncaring. He actually wanted to make sure everybody was okay. And he released all the passengers. Once he got the $200,000 and the parachutes and the food, he let everybody go, except he kept the people he needed, which is the pilots, obviously. With only 3 pilots and 1 flight attendant left on board, they took off from Seattle with the marked bills. Now, they did mark the bills, and I don't know how much time they had to do all this crap, but they supposedly had marked bills, and is some proof the fact that they were marked.
Okay, so they weren't marked. The serial numbers were recorded, and the serial numbers had been pre-recorded. This money came from the C First Bank, the downtown branch in Seattle there. And they had, their chief of security was a former FBI guy, or no, I think he was a former guy from Scotland Yard, actually. He was a British guy. Their chief of security had thought it smart to have a pre-recorded ransom pack where the numbers were pre-recorded so they could give these to, in case of a bank robbery or something like that, or an extortion, such as the Cooper hijacking, that the money that they gave out would have pre-recorded serial numbers. So pretty smart on his part. So yeah, the FBI didn't need to record anything. This was just, the bank happened to have a serial number list and of $250,000, and Cooper was given $200,000 of this money. And so that's where it was. So the bills weren't marked. They were just, the serial numbers were recorded.
What did he think about whether he's going to get marked bills or not? Generally speaking, you would have some clue that the bills might be marked in some way, or photographs so that they knew what the numbers of the bills were, whatever. So that if you ever use those bills, they would be identified as being from the hijacking, and therefore they could identify where you were, where you're spending the money and all that stuff. In the long run, only one small portion of those bills, it's a little over $5,000, showed up, were the bills from the hijacking, and the rest of the $200,000 has never shown up anyplace. I'll get into why the 5,000, a little bit over 5,000, showed up. So anyway, they take off from Seattle, and now he's basically saying, we're going to fly to Mexico City. It's kind of just a southern path. Not that he had any intention of going to Mexico City. And it was dark and lightly raining. In the 45 minutes after takeoff, Cooper sent the flight attendant to the cockpit while donning the parachute, tied the bank bag full of $20 bills to himself. Apparently, they kind of slightly screwed him on that. They tried to, first of all, he should have asked for bigger bills, but, generally speaking, $20 bills are easier to offload than $100 bills, right? So he got these $20 bills, and what they were hoping is that it was a lot of stuff, so they'd fall out, and but he got those bills, and they put them in a sack that wasn't too well put together. So I'm trying to find the picture of, there we go. So it was the canvas bag that contained one of the parachutes was given to him. And then he asked for 4 chutes. He only used 2, but one was a piece of crap. He used the cord from one of the remaining parachutes to tie the stolen money bag shut because he didn't want to lose the money, which this is some of the money that was eventually found. But so he had the parachute, then he tied up the money to himself, and he took the briefcase, which is interesting to me. I'll stop here and ask you, why do you think he took the briefcase? I mean, you're jumping out of a freaking plane. You got your money. Why do you take the briefcase?
Well, Cooper was very heady about not leaving anything on the plane. He obviously left his tie on the plane by accident, I think. But this is a guy who was smoking, and his matchbook became empty, and the stewardess threw it away, and he said, "No, give me that back." So even his matchbook they gave back. All of his notes that he had, the note he had brought aboard the plane, even the notes that the stewardesses wrote for him, he requested all of those to be returned to him. So I don't think that the briefcase, him not leaving the briefcase isn't a big deal. The FBI think, and I think too, that he just chunked it out the back of the plane at some point, because the area between Seattle and Portland is very wooded, if you know anything. If Cooper knew anything about the geography of the area, and plenty of clues that he did, then he would know that they were flying over just wilderness most of the time. So he almost certainly threw that out the back of the plane at some point, because he didn't tie it to himself or anything, but he just got rid of it.
I want to point this out as far as the evidence goes. Okay, let's look at something that happened on the plane. So he's on the plane. He asked for bourbon. He spilled some of the bourbon, didn't drink much of it. He had a lot of time to drink more and more bourbon. They said he wasn't an alcoholic or like had a big, because he didn't drink much, but he did drink this glass of bourbon, some of the bourbon. He had his hands on that glass. He also, by the way, smoked cigarettes.
It was a plastic cup, not a glass, for what it's worth.
Uh, don't drink alcohol while committing crimes. This is excellent, Christoph. Actually, it's true. If you drink too much, you may screw it up. So he did not do that. He was cautious about, he asked for a bourbon, but he only drank a little bit.
Well, yes. So, in fact, it's my belief that Cooper was inspired by an event that happened about 2 weeks earlier, which was a Canadian who hijacked a plane, asked for a ransom, and was going to jump out with a parachute. I think Cooper was a copycat of that. Cooper saw it on TV and said, "Hey, I can do that. I can hold my beer," sort of thing, right? But that hijacking 2 weeks earlier was committed by a guy named Paul Sini. Paul Sini was an alcoholic, and Paul Sini got drunk on the plane, and during the incident, a male crew member hit him over the head with an axe and busted his head open. And that's how that was foiled, was by drinking. So there's that.
And then he did smoke cigarettes. And whether he smoked cigarettes because he was anxious, and he always smoked anyway. So they looked at the cigarettes as possibly being something he normally did. And here's something I want to point out as we go along. Nobody ever commits a crime differently from the way they live in normal life. This is something that is rarely talked about. But you don't act differently during a crime than you do in life. In other words, we are who we are. If you take serial killers, if they're the type that jump out of the bush and just like attack you and like beat you with a rock and stab you, they're not all that, careful in real life either. If you get a guy who kidnaps a woman, takes her to a basement, ties her to a wall, and keeps her alive for 3 months in his dungeon, that guy is patient, meticulous. There's different, you just don't commit crimes you're not a different person when you commit the crime. So he had his own personality when he committed this crime. Yeah, I think that there's no good reason why he would jump out and take the stupid briefcase. If it was just a fake bomb, just leave it on the freaking airplane. Why would you weight yourself down with that for no reason? They never found the briefcase, by the way. Keep in mind, they never found the parachute, the briefcase, a body. They did find a little bit of the money, and I'll get to that because that is the most complex, confusing thing of this whole maps. Maybe,
yeah, it is.
Maybe possible. So, but what do we have? What is one of the issues about let me go back to this picture, because this is going to be a big issue. This is the biggest issue for me of all the suspects. What strikes you about this picture? Guy's hijacking a plane, asking for $200,000 in cash. He doesn't want to be caught. What is odd about this picture? No gloves is the issue. No gloves. Okay. He's leaving fingerprints. Yes, every frickin' where. He's holding a glass. He's touching this. Fingerprints are freaking everywhere. What does that tell you about our suspect? No, we're not in the days later. They're not decades later. We don't, again, I have no idea if his nails were nice or manicured. That's all from the documentary. That's a fake. That's an actor's hand. I love it, Carla. Suggests he does not have a criminal record if he's not worried about leaving prints. Thank you. That's what struck me. One other thing. What else is he not worried about? Yeah, he never did crime. He's not a student of criminal profiling.
Okay, so here's the thing about the prints, though. Cooper's prints were all partial prints. Okay, so every print that they recovered, basically they recovered a bunch of prints that they were able to figure out whose was what. But from around his seat, they recovered 11 partial fingerprints, all partial. Okay, none complete, all partial, which says that he, talking to the FBI agents from the time who worked on the case, including a guy named John Detler, he confirmed that, yes, these criminals back then would obfuscate their fingerprints with glue or something like that. So Cooper, because of his nonchalance with fingerprints, seems that he obfuscated his prints. And also, we have corroborating evidence in the fact that the fingerprints found around his seat were all partial prints. No complete prints. The only complete impression they found was a palm print from where he had, pushed up from on the armrest to get up. They found a palm print, which is really the only complete print we have of D.B. Cooper, according to the FBI. But the problem is the military never took palm prints back then, and they still don't. Law enforcement didn't start taking palm prints until, I think, the LAPD and the NYPD until 2003. And I'm not even sure how ubiquitous that is even now to take palm prints for criminals. But regardless, it appears that he obfuscated his prints more than this idea that he wasn't a criminal and had no criminal history and wasn't worried about his fingerprints. Because, you're still going to be worried about your fingerprints, though. Like, what if they catch you for some reason? You don't have to have your fingerprints on record for them to be able to find you, or for the prints to be used against you. You could be caught, and then they would analyze the prints later on. So I don't buy the idea that he had no criminal record. And I have no criminal record, and if I was going to commit a crime, I'd be worried about fingerprints. Because they could be used against you later on if they catch you somehow, right, to prove your guilt. So no, I don't buy that. And also, like I said, we have corroborating evidence that shows that very likely his fingerprints were obfuscated because all the prints were partial that were found around his seat.
This is an interesting point. He does not have a criminal record, or he may not have expected to survive. As Allison says, maybe this is all just a big thrill thing for him. He was just going to do this thing to see if he'd get away with it. And he knew if when he jumped, he wasn't going to survive anyway, probably. So he really didn't give a crap about his fingerprints. That is possible and not unreasonable to consider. Okay, so we're going to keep that out on the chart, whatever chart I have here. One, he never committed a crime previously, so his fingerprints are not in the system. Two, he didn't think he was going to survive. One more thing. Never committed a crime, so he wasn't in the system. Two, maybe he didn't think he was going to survive, so he didn't give a crap. Three, where else might they have fingerprints? Does anybody think about where he might have fingerprints otherwise?
Military?
No, this guy, he said he didn't know about fingerprints. This guy's not stupid. Okay, he planned a very meticulous crime. I'll get into more of them. Bingo, Martina. The Army. No, that's correct. No military record. Yep, there you go. You're all rolled in on that. Yes, finally. That's what I'm looking for. No military record. I checked how they had this weird thing where up until about 1975 where I found it, because it was weird. Now I lost it. Somewhere around 1974, they stopped actually fingerprinting people going into the military. That's what it says. And I'm like, what the? But before that, they did. So if he was in the military, he'd know his fingerprints would be on record in the U.S. military. And if you're going to commit a crime like this, and you think your fingerprints are out there, why would you commit a crime like this? Leave fingerprints on glasses everywhere around you. Unless A, your fingerprints cannot be identified, or B, you weren't planning to survive. Those are the only two that make any sense. So keep that in mind.
And just to repeat that, he seemed to take care to not leave his fingerprints behind. Seemingly, given that these were partial fingerprints. And like I said, I don't, just because your fingerprints aren't on file currently doesn't mean that the fingerprints you leave on the plane can't later be used against you if you're caught for some other reason, right? It's further proof of guilt.
So now Cooper sent the flight attendant to the cockpit, donned the parachute, tied the bank bag full of $20 bills to himself, lowered the rear stairs. Lowered the rear stairs. The stair, the stairs when you come out, the ones you have to walk up into the plane and come back out of the plane, especially back then. Way more of those than today. He knew how to lower the stairs. Apparently, even people who flew these commercial airlines and everybody who worked did not know this stuff. That they did not know you could lower those stairs during the flight. They only thought you could do that when you're on the ground. He knew you could lower them during the flight. He knew how to do it. That is very unique. So this guy is not just anybody. This guy has a familiarity. He had a familiarity with the Boeing planes. He had a familiarity with flight paths. He actually knew the areas that he was flying over. So he wasn't just some dummy who just jumped onto the plane and said, "Hey, I got a bomb."
Okay, so the issue with him knowing things is odd because he seemed to know some things about the plane, but not about others. He didn't actually know how to lower the stairs, according to him. He needed to keep one of the hostages back there to lower the stairs because he says he didn't know how to. He didn't know actually how to physically do it. So he seemed to have a abstract knowledge that this could be done, but not a practical knowledge of how it was done. So it's kind of strange. This is the difficulty with profiling Cooper is he has all of these strange conundrums where he knows things. He's stupid sometimes and brilliant other times. And it's confounding. That's the problem with this case is it is confounding because of how odd his knowledge seems to be. It comes and goes sometimes. He's very incongruent with his thought process and what he seems to know and what he doesn't know.
Now, they searched the area which he landed in. They got jets, a helicopter, aircraft. They scrambled close to where they thought that he jumped. The military was called in after the hijacking. Approximately 1,000 troops searched the suspected jump zone on foot and in helicopters.
I wonder where she got that number from. Is that 1,000? I wonder if that's on the Citizen Sleuth's webpage, because that's not correct. This is again extremely, extremely exhaustingly pedantic. So if Pat's watching, forgive me. It's not an attack on you at all. There's so much odd information out there, but this is pedantic, so we're doing it. It was actually about 300 soldiers. Not that it matters, but they were from the 7th Armored Cavalry Division out of Fort Lewis, Washington. I actually spoke to one of these guys, and for my book, I never thought I would be able to find one of the 300 guys. But I was able to find one of them, and that was really interesting. He was the youngest soldier, actually. I believe he was 17 even at the time, but or maybe he had just turned 18, but he was the youngest soldier there, Mr. Holloway from California. And he got trench foot and had to sleep in the snow, and it was just not a good thing. And they actually got around it because, see, the Army is not supposed to be used in law enforcement. The Posse Comitatus Act says that you can't do that. Says that the Army cannot be used to investigate crimes domestically like this. So what they did is they got around it. We have all these FBI files that have now been declassified and are released. And we have this back and forth between the FBI and the Army saying, well, look, we can, if we're asked about it, what we need to say is that this is that the soldiers are taking part in adventure training. So they're doing adventure. It's a training mission, essentially. They're doing adventure training. That's how they skirted Posse Comitatus. Pretty interesting, because this was not the National Guard, right, who can do things like this. This was the actual active military. And hell, they used the SR-71 Blackbird, even the Air Force did, to look for the briefcase bomb along the flight path. To see if he had discarded it somewhere. But Yeah, the SR-71 actually flew 5 missions over the flight path, and it was cloud cover. Surprise, surprise, Pacific Northwest, but cloud cover every time.
The Boeing 727 was used in the hijacking was flown out over the ocean, and the stairs lowered and weights dropped in an attempt to determine when Cooper jumped. They said they felt this jolt or something, and they thought that's when he jumped. I'm not sure why that would mean anything.
I mean, it's, yeah. Basically, I guess I'll get into it. I just have to get into it. So I'll have videos about this. I have a whole video about this called "Did DB Cooper Actually Jump?" But basically, the stairs acted like a diving board when he jumped off, because of the wind. Basically, the stairs weren't lowering all the way until he started to walk down, because the wind resistance was keeping the stairs from falling. And he actually called up to the front cockpit and said, "Hey, slow down a little bit." And they did. And he was able to come down the stairs. And, because the stairs were lowered by gravity alone, his weight lowered them, but the wind was pushing up against it. So as soon as if the wind's pushing up against it and it's coming down against the wind, as soon as that weight is removed down here, the wind is going to push it up. So it's kind of like a diving board. I liken it to, I think the best analogy to me that I've come up with for the pressure bump, really, for this understanding all this, is if you're driving down the road and you stick your hand out the window, right? And all that wind is pushing up against your hand, right? And just pushing up against it. And so you have to exert some energy, some muscle to keep your hand from flying all the way back out the window. So just think about how sometimes, just for fun, you'll like release the muscle tension and your arm goes flying back when you're driving down the road if you have your arm out the window, right? Just imagine you release your muscles and your arm just like this. Well, that's what happened, is his weight was your muscles pushing up against the wind, lowering the stairs. And so as soon as he's off the stairs, there's no weight pushing up against the wind. So boom. So the stairs did like this, and they hit up against the top of the fuselage of the plane. And that shoved a bunch of air down the length of the cabin. And that's why their ears all popped. Okay. And this happened again and again and again in all the subsequent hijackings. I'm not sure if she's going to get into it here, but there were 5 other guys who jumped out with ransom money, not just Cooper. He started a trend. Over a dozen people tried, and 5 actually got out with money under parachutes, other than Cooper, which is pretty interesting. But all of them also caused similar things. In fact, the FBI told, because the crew of Cooper's flight didn't know what it really signified at the moment, so they didn't know if that was him jumping or not. So they just continued on to Reno. But subsequently, after testing was done by Northwest Airlines to determine, so they pushed the sled out over the ocean. They lowered a 200-pound sled and then let it go to see if the thing would do that. And we have photographs. It did slam back up against the top of the fuselage when that weight was released, kind of like a diving board being released of weight, sort of. But when they determined that this is what's going to happen when you jump off of a plane like this, off the stairs, they informed the other. They kind of kept it a secret, I guess. But in the subsequent hijackings, those pilots were told, "Hey, look, during the previous, I guess they're called parajackings, parachute hijackings, be looking for something, a sensation in your ears. You're going to feel a popping or something in your ears, and that'll signify when the guy jumped out of the plane. So call us and let us know." And sure enough, when this happened, they said, "Hey, we just felt this. We think he's gone." In these subsequent parajackings, okay, but the Cooper crew didn't know that. But no, the plane, they all felt a physical sensation, and it was replicated by the dummy test that they did a month later, and also replicated in real life in the other incidents where this happened. Okay. So that's how we know that he did jump and approximately when he jumped.
I don't understand that, because putting the stairs down would give you the jolt, but that he jumped with a huge airplane, I don't think that you would necessarily feel his body like leaping off. That doesn't make sense to me. Um, and he had sent the flight attendant up to the cockpit, so nobody was watching him when he did this. I don't know when they really thought he did it. So when they thought they felt something, that's when they sort of said that's where he jumped. But he may not actually have jumped for another 5 minutes or whatever, and that could put him way farther away than they think he jumped. So where he jumped and where he landed is really questionable. And so they searched.
Yeah, and she's not wrong. I mean, it is questionable when he jumped, but we're talking about a matter of minutes, not, I mean, a matter of 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Vicious debates online about, this. But when we're debating all this, we're talking about the difference between this town and a town like right next to it. So, I mean, we're within, I mean, we there's no doubt what county of the country he jumped out in. We're just talking about a difference within 5 miles or so, 5 to 10 miles really is what we're looking at. I mean, so we know he jumped out when he jumped out. We're just not sure of the exact timing of it because it wasn't recorded on anything, sadly.
Why did they come up with nothing? All right, let's look at the area that he supposedly jumped in. All right, if you look at the top, you see Seattle. If you look at the bottom, you see Portland. So he was said fly to Mexico City, which would go over that direction. He was probably not intending to go to Mexico City. He clearly wanted to get out of the plane quite quickly, which to me means that he either lived in that area or he lived in Canada, someplace up to in the Northwest or above.
Well, it would also indicate that that's where his transportation was. That's how he was going to get back. And it makes sense that he jumped back to where he started, right? I mean, if he started in Portland, then clearly either his accomplice was there who had dropped him off at the airport or his car was there, right? I mean, that's where he jumped. Yeah, so I think it's not, I don't think it's too complicated. People are saying, oh, he wanted to jump in Seattle or wherever, but I don't think so. There are some people who like to say that he was going to jump very quickly out in Seattle, but I've never bought that because he wasn't even finished tying the money to himself when they took off. So he wasn't ready to jump out. So he knew he had time. I mean, 30 minutes to get down to Portland. So, I mean, he knew he had time to finish up what he was doing after he sent Tina to the front. Because he didn't send Tina to the front until after they take off. And she says that when he sent her to the front, he was still messing with the money bag. He was still tying it to himself and all this other stuff, or just securing it when they were taking off. So he wasn't ready to go yet. If he wanted to jump in outside Seattle, or in Seattle, or just outside Seattle, then he could have told them, I'm not ready yet. Don't take off yet. But he said, let's get the show on the road. Let's go. So he knew he had some time. I think it just logically, he was jumping back where he started.
He wasn't really planning to go to to Mexico. So he supposedly jumped out somewhere around a place called Ariel. And you can see, if you look at Portland, you'll see, if you go up, count up two names, you'll see Ariel to the right of that river. That's their belief. And of course, Ariel has made a lot of money having a lot of D.B. Cooper events. Whether he jumped out there or not, we don't know. Now,
probably not. I mean, my guess, no, probably a little, certainly maybe a little bit west of Ariel, and probably, it's hard to say, but probably a little further south than that for sure. I'm not sure how much further south, maybe 5-10 miles, but I think Ariel's a smidge too north of where I would prefer Cooper. The evidence leads me to think Cooper jumped. I mean, none of us really know, but somewhere between Ariel and the river, he's out. But
when they said he jumped out near Vancouver, I thought they meant Canada, but no, they meant Vancouver.
Poor Vancouver.
Is that Washington? Vancouver, Washington. Anyway, I know Portland is Oregon. I'm not quite sure where the line is for Washington State. So anyway, he jumped out there. Now, what's interesting about this, it gets a little confusing, is the flight path itself. If you look at, do you see where that river? You see the river, like you see Vancouver on that river where the little dot is, and
That's
then you see
Columbia.
that little blue part coming off to the left of that bigger river. You see the smaller river. Well, a little bit above that is where a bunch of money was found eventually. Let me show you a little bit clearer here. It was this place called Tena Bar. You see again Portland. You see the river like that, and it's a place called Tena Bar, also known as Tina Bar, and that's a location where a bunch of the money was found. Now he took $200,000, but $5,000, a little over $5,000, was found 9 years later in Tena Bar.
Pedantic. $6,000.
I'll read that in just a second about the story about that. So anyway, that's a lousy picture. Oh, I just want to point this picture out because you see there's a big lake there. There's a big lake to the right. There's a big lake to the left. And here's the supposed flight path, which is going down there. That's what they guess the flight path is.
No, there's no guessing about the flight path. I mean, you can even see it up there at the top. Sage radar. Okay, this, not her fault again, but the flight path stuff is, it's, people really want to put Cooper in the river, or they really want to explain the money at Tina Bar. It's funny she calls it Tena Bar, which is probably the correct version, but we call it Tina Bar because we like Tina Mucklow and Tina. So she probably, I mean, it's funny. Very rarely do you hear people say it correctly. I think she did say it correctly. It's Tena Bar. But the flight path is basically one of the only surefire things that we have. One of the only surefire, I would say, pieces of evidence that we absolutely have it's really undeniable for multiple reasons. When Flight 305 began to squawk, squawking is when planes can communicate things. When they began to squawk the code for hijack, which was, I believe, 3300 or something, they switched their transponder to squawk, we're being hijacked. Okay. When that happened, U.S. nuclear defense, okay, which was the SAGE radar system, this was the predecessor to NORAD. Okay, this was in the height of the Cold War. It's 71. I mean, this is, this is very much the height of the Cold War. When a plane began to squawk hijack, we're being hijacked, the SAGE radar system across the whole country, okay, picked up on that. All right. And it became a bogey, essentially. It could have been a missile for all they know. I mean, it's a computer, right? It's a computer. The computer doesn't know the difference between a plane and a missile. I mean, it's a bogey, okay? Which means that it was automatically pinged every 5 seconds by all the different radar stations. Ping, ping. It was shooting pings at it to get its location, okay? And that was recorded automatically on a hard drive. Heady stuff for 1971, right? But that plane's position was recorded in real time every 5 seconds by the most sophisticated radar system on planet Earth at the time. Okay, multiple redundancies. It wasn't a failure or anything like that. And they revised it, and they were able to get the flight path, the Air Force, to the FBI within a day. Okay, because it was recorded in real time. So all they had to do was now it didn't record like on a map. It recorded like GPS with the early equivalent called JORF which was the early equivalent of GPS, but like it recorded, it spit out GPS numbers of where the pings were hitting, right? So they have a very good idea. In fact, it's within a quarter mile of accuracy, which is pretty good for back then. And that quarter mile, the flight path, if you see there on this map here, let me pull this up. You can see here that I've overlaid the Air Force's flight path, which is in orange, overlaid with the Victor 23 airway, which is highlighted. Okay, and then the green is where Tina Bar is, and you can just see. I mean that it's if we only had the pilots saying we flew down Victor 23 airway, which remember airways are like roads in the sky. I mean that's what they're for. I mean planes just don't fly anywhere they want to, okay, because they run into mountains or run into other planes or towers and things. So, commercial aircraft follow roads in the sky called airways, or jetways if they're even higher. I think they're called jetways if they're really high up. Airways are lower, but anyway, they're roads. And so the pilots were white knuckling down Victor 23 airway. And we have their testimony saying that. They were assigned. We have that on the radio transcripts of Northwest Airlines saying, okay, you're cleared down Victor 23 airway, which is highlighted. So it's no coincidence that the Air Force map that was done by the radar, looks just like, kind of follows along. Except in one spot, you'll see down there by the airport, you can see a little bend there. That was the flight crew manually hand flying. They wanted to fly around PDX. Victor 23 airway actually goes right over PDX, but they, for whatever reason, diverted around PDX, maybe because they had a bomb on the plane that they thought, I don't know. But they diverted around PDX. But yeah, they never came close to where the money was found. The flight path is one of the few things that we have with, I mean, you can't say 100% accuracy, but like, we know approximately where the plane was at any given time, because of not just the pilots saying we were following this road, but we have the actual scientific data their plane was pinged every 5 seconds for its location. So this is not them, hitting another airplane, or this is Flight 305. This was a bogey being tracked by nuclear defense radar. Okay, the flight path. We definitely know the flight path. Okay. So again, she doesn't know that. She doesn't know all this stuff. That's fine. I'm not. We're not attacking her because she has all these other cases that she does. So she's just very superficial on this Cooper stuff. But again, my channel is. If you're watching my channel, it's grad level Cooper stuff, right? We're earning our dissertations in Cooper. So anyway.
Is, and I think I've got one more picture here. So if you see Tina Bar over to the green,
oh my God,
they're saying that no, that wasn't the flight path. He was more over to the blue. So there's no way the money he had, that $5,000, would end up there. Now you say, what's this $5,000? Anyway, here's what happened. Okay, they never found this guy. They never found him. They never found the 200,000. They never found his body. They never found the parachute he used to jump with. They never found the briefcase. Nothing. Now, where could he have, when he jumped out, where would he have landed? I want to just point this out. Well, this would not be good. You jump into the middle of a forest. He could have ended up there. He could have ended up there in that lake. But in that same sort of area, you have fields. That's why they're searching these fields, because it could have landed in a field. Now, also, the other issue would be is why did he want to jump out there and not someplace else? All right, so if we go back to look at Portland, supposedly the plane was coming into Portland. Now, Ariel is where they guessed he jumped, but he could have jumped way, way, way closer to Portland. The lights of Portland, it was dark. It was rainy and it was overcast. But there would be lights coming out of Portland. Now, admittedly, if you were in the front in the cockpit, you would be seeing this much better than if you were somewhere else in the plane, which he was in the back of the plane trying to jump off of that get out of that stairs that he was lowering. But I don't know, planes bank and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times you'll see lights to the left, you'll see lights to the right. I don't know that he couldn't see the lights and say, I'm coming into Portland. I got a chance here. This is where I'm going to jump because I want to be near, I don't want to jump into a freaking complete forest. I don't want to really, think about this. Why would you be jumping? And where's my other picture here? I have another picture, which I like. Is it this one? Yeah. Seriously. Do I really want to jump into that area and then have to trek God knows how long? How about this picture? Do I really want to get stuck there? No. I don't know how much you could, in that briefcase, you could have long johns under the suit. You could have something in the briefcase, I say like hat and gloves. But would you want to jump in the middle of some wild area that you have to hike out of for like 20 days?
Yeah. This is interesting. I'm glad that she brought this up because this is something that I've been arguing about for a while or promoting, is that having talked to pilots who flew that area at the time, in fact, one of the pilots I've talked to, the FBI's Northwest Airlines' drop zone is literally right in his front yard. he had an airstrip. So they're like, oh my God, the drop zone, leads to this guy's airstrip. And so they interrogated him pretty heavily. But anyway, local pilot. And I gave him the scenario. I said, look, you're at 10,000 feet. You've got triple cloud cover beneath you. You're going down Victor 23. And remember, this is the guy who had an airstrip in his front yard in 71. He flew airplanes. He was actually involved in the Cooper investigation. They investigated him because he was flying his planes around the night before, and a bunch of people, misremembered when that happened and told the FBI, oh my God, there was a small plane flying in circles the night of the hijacking. It was actually the night before, but it was this guy, Mr. McClellan. And anyway, so I asked him, I said, when would you start to see the lights of Portland? And he said, right around the battleground area is when I would start to see the lights of Portland on a cloudy day. And that's roughly where Cooper jumps, okay? And we can look at the other hijackers. I think one thing that Pat would agree with, and she kind of hinted at this, is that people are people, right? I mean, the way Cooper behaved is probably the way that, or his thinking at least, is similar to other guys who came after him, parajackers. I mean, and we know from talking to these guys, including one who's still alive, we've talked to him a lot. He's a good friend of mine, and Marty McNally, who jumped out over Peru, Indiana, or they call it Peru. I think it's called Peru maybe, but he jumped out over Indiana. And we have his thought process. We can talk to him. We have his thought process on it. He said he didn't want to jump in an area that was so heavily lit up and populated that he would, run the risk of landing on top of a cop car at a four-way stop, right? But also you don't want to land too far away from civilization, right? So you're looking for this Goldilocks spot of, I'm far enough away where I'm not going to be observed coming down, but I'm close enough to civilization to be able to escape quickly enough. We can look at Richard McCoy, who was not Cooper, people, okay? But we can look at Richard McCoy, the copycat. He jumped out, and where he jumped out was, I believe, south of Provo, where he was from. And he jumped out in a more rural area, but was also not too far away from where he was from. So, like I said, you don't want to be, you want to be far enough away to where you're not visible coming down, but close enough to civilization to where you can escape quickly. So yeah, Pat's on the right path here for sure on that. And I mean, Cooper could have, we know from talking, again, we can talk to McNally, who jumped out of a 727. He said he was able to look forward down there and look forward to the front, under the plane and see what was out in front of them. So he had goggles on, and I think it's reasonable to think that Cooper had goggles in his bag there, in his mystery bag, which makes sense. And Cooper could have seen the lights of Portland coming up and said, okay, well, I think that was his plan all along was, hey, look, I'm going to jump out back to where I started. Okay. But of course the problem with that is he never specified a flight path for them to follow. He just said, fly to Mexico City. And he agreed to a refueling stop at Reno. So he didn't know, he had no idea they were going to follow the Victor 23 airway, which goes back over Portland. He didn't know that. That would be a hell of an assumption for him to make, when it would have been to no detriment just to say, fly the V-23 airway. Because it's not you don't have to hide where the airplane is. I mean, everyone in the country following it is going to know where the airplane is. Okay, the issue is when you jump out. That's what you have to hide from them, or try to hide from him. And that's why, another reason why he wanted to put them as far away. Fly to Mexico City, right? I mean, to him, in his brain, if he's going to jump out in Portland, that gives him hours of a head start before they even realize he's gone, perhaps. That's why you get this long distance away. Okay? So, yeah. But yeah, I'm glad that she's bringing up the logic of a guy who's going to do this is saying, I don't want to jump too close, but I don't want to jump too far away. I want just right.
Probably not. What's the point? You got this money on you. Unless you don't give a crap and you are trying to kill yourself. You just want the thrill of doing it, and then I'm going to jump to my death, maybe. Or what it seems more like he was trying to get at least close enough to Portland to jump close to a city where, yes, he might have to walk for a day or two, but he'd be able to get to some kind of civilization. He could go into a store and buy something. He could break into a store and buy something. There was somebody thought somebody broke in and took like survival type stuff. Yeah.
She's talking about the Heisen store burglary. Okay, there were several break-ins actually that night. It wasn't just the Heisen store. We've learned there were several break-ins that night, and it seems likely that this is not Cooper. I'm not sure about that. Okay. Again, we can talk to these copycats like Mark McNally and say, "Hey, would you have broken into a store?" And he said, "No, I wouldn't have done that. That would have been, I could have got caught for that, or somebody'd shoot me or whatever." So, I mean, you have this money, you're not going to do other crimes, especially not for gloves and things like this. But yeah, the Heisen store, gloves were taken, cigarettes, and like beef jerky, I think. But then there was another store just north of there, another gas station sort of store that was broken into that night. Also taken gloves and cigars, cigarettes, but in Polaroid film, which is kind of interesting. But they think that later on, they determined that this was a local, like, group of drug dealers or drug heads out of Kalama. Or is it Kalama? Out of Kalama, Tomato, Kalama, Washington. I'll just call it Kalama. But they think there was a ring of thieves there who were doing this sort of stuff. So it was probably them and not Cooper at all these different places. But anyway, and these people probably broke in looking for money and just took some stuff. Hey, take some cigarette smokes. And hey, Polaroid film's expensive, so take some of that too. But they were probably looking for money, and when they didn't find any, they just took that junk. But probably not Cooper, but you never know.
He could hitch a ride. There's all kinds of things he could do near civilization that he couldn't do in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Finding his body in absolutely middle of nowhere is not easy. So if he did jump in the middle of nowhere, you would think at some point they'd find the parachute or the briefcase. I don't know what happens if he goes into the lake, whether the parachute would stay afloat, or once he started, his body would come up eventually when it, after a few number of days, he would float to the top and the parachute would be there. I find it weird that they found zero.
Yeah, I'm with her on that. I mean, this is the thing about this. This is him jumping into an area that has developed a lot since then. I mean, even back then, though, if he jumped in Ariel or wherever, I mean, this is Clark County, Washington. So, and according to the 1970 census, there was 130,000 residents of Clark County, Washington at the time. Now there's 500,000. Okay, and remember, this is bordering a major metropolitan city. Okay, big enough to have an NBA team. Okay, so not small, and certainly grown up. And now, granted, Cooper's body, if he had landed in the woods, would have been. Nobody's going to find a dead guy in a parachute just laying there, even a year later. I mean, his body would have been torn asunder by animals very quickly. I mean, we've got actual evidence of this. A young hunter went missing the month that Cooper committed his hijacking in early November of 1971. A 16-year-old boy named James Annis went hunting and never came back, and we still don't know what happened to him. But about a year later, and this is in Clark County, about a year later, they found his rifle and like a femur or something, nothing else. So the idea that Cooper would be just laying out there dead, nobody's going to find Cooper's body. But again, he's got a money bag with him. He's got this parachute with him, either open or closed, whether he opened it or not. If he died, he presumably didn't open his parachute, which seems stupid. But regardless, if Cooper was dead somewhere, then that sort of stuff is not going to deteriorate to the point where it's unrecognizable. And again, let's just think about this, people. The money ending up on Tina Barr used to be evidence that he died. Like, oh, well, he landed in the river. But we know that he didn't jump over the river. He jumped well north of the river. Okay? So really, the money being there, being so far away from where he jumped, to me, is the best proof that he lived. Unless you want to come up with some scenario. I mean, think about this. To come up with the money being there for some reason, you have to come up with some scenario where Cooper dies and somebody finds his body and takes the money and buries all the remains of Cooper, or somebody takes the money and then that person does something that makes the money end up on Tina Barr eventually. Like, I mean, it doesn't make much sense. So Cooper, I mean, again, all the other copycats survived. Parachuting is not some crazy dangerous thing. I mean, I think Cooper would have been hurt, very likely would have been hurt. A lot of the copycats were hurt when they jump. I mean, landing at night in a parachute's not great, especially if you can't really see what you're about to hit. But he's not going to be dead by that. I mean, Cooper very likely lived, and the FBI at the time believed he lived too. In fact, only one FBI agent I've ever spoken with or even heard of believes that Cooper died that night, certainly. And that'd be Larry Carr. The next you'll get Ralph Himmelsbach, the agent, who said 50-50. But the majority of the agents who actually worked the case back then, who I've talked to or read about, including the special agent in charge of the Seattle office, said, yeah, he probably slept in his own bed that night or slept in a bed that night. I mean, they thought he lived. They were looking for a living person because all these searches turned up nothing. And granted, you know, they may have been looking in the wrong spot, which they probably were. I mean, I think they were looking in the wrong spot. But if they were looking in the wrong spot, it means that he jumped further south, which is in more developed land, especially now, with 500,000 people living there. I mean, something would have been found probably by then. But again, the money being found there just indicates that he got out of where he jumped, at least.
Except for this one little bit of money. The money in a place called Tina Bar. Now, here's what happened there. 9 years later, in 1980, just north of Portland on the Columbia River, a young boy named Brian Ingram was digging a fire pit in the sand at a place called Tina Bar. That is this place, Tina Bar, members only. Let me show you the area of Tina Bar. It's like that. So it's a sandy area on the side of a river.
It did look like that.
And he found this money, and then they sent in. They went in and they dug up the place.
It's a bunch of boulders now. It did look like that at the time, but no, it looks completely different now. And the spot where the money was found is underwater currently. It's about 15 feet offshore and about 8 feet down, just erosion and things like this. So the place where he found the money is actually underwater now.
And this is the money they found. He found there were 3 bundles of cash with some rubber bands that might originally been in some kind of maybe a bag, but they just had they had rubber bands, three packs of $20 bills. There was a total of $5,800.
6,000.
The Cooper serial numbers matched, and the first evidence since 1971 came to light. So they were from the hijacking. The FBI searched and analyzed the beach. The river was dredged by Cooper hunters, and the theories on how the money got there supercharged the legend of D.B. Cooper. So that money, now mind you, when he was on the plane, he actually tried to give some money away to the flight attendant, say, hey, you helped me out, thank you very much. And he took some money out to give to her, and she said, no, I can't take anything. It's against rules. That may well be part of the money that fell, or some people believe was planted or hidden in this location. The flight path, as you have seen, did not go over Tina Bar. It was farther to the east. So how the hell did this stuff get in Tina Bar? There's lots of theories on that. One of the problems is that the rivers just don't go, like you think, okay, it fell and then it will go downriver and end up there. And supposedly it's the wrong direction, unless he jumped way later, which he might have done, which people don't want to recognize sometimes. But if he didn't jump when they thought he jumped, and he jumped way later, and the flight path was slightly over, it may well be that could have gotten to that location by floating down over time. Where it was, meanwhile, one doesn't know. Now, there's many people who believe that he buried this money for some purpose. And I want you to profile this right now. What's the problem with that theory? Goes over your house. Did he jump in your house, Sarah? Okay, he hid it to get it later. The dude has $200,000. He hides $5,000. Why?
Let's also not forget that area was private property. Okay, at the time, that was the Fazio Brothers construction sand operation there. I mean, that was not like easily accessible. It's still not easily accessible. It wasn't then. The idea of Cooper burying money on private property, granted, people would go there to fish and stuff, but it's still private property. Okay, and there was gates and things to get in there. Okay, it's not easy to get to. So the thought that Cooper would go there to bury money is, especially on the night of the hijacking, no. Now, I mean, it's not unheard of, the idea of burying money and coming back later to get it. Martin McNally, again, I've mentioned him, the copycat. Now, he lost his money when he jumped. It's something people may have happened to Cooper, is that when McNally jumped out, the money blew off of him, okay? He didn't secure it properly. He lost $500,000, so like $3 million today just dropped off of him into the darkness. He never saw it again. But Mac, part of his ransom was a collapsible shovel. He was going to bury the money and come back to get it later, okay? But we know from the other parajackers is that they just stashed the money somewhere and then came back later to get it. They didn't bury it. But regardless, Tina Barr is nowhere near the flight path. So, I mean, Cooper may have stashed the money somewhere temporarily. But that to go get his car or whatever, go to a phone and call his accomplice or whatever. But if he had one, burying it there that night is just unlikely. I mean, maybe at a later date or something. I don't know. I mean, who knows? But more than likely, it washed up there at some time. But the problem with that is that we've done experiments on this. Money bundles do not float. They will sink. They will. If you have $6,000 of 20s rubber banded together, throw it in the river, it will sink. The cotton linen gets waterlogged and just goes to the bottom. Now it could bounce along the bottom and get pulled up by something, I don't know. But and it wasn't a dredge. I mean, there were dredging operations, but the dredge pipes would have torn it to bits as it spit it out. Okay, these were bumped, together. So now maybe if it was in a bag or something, it could have floated along at some point. Or maybe if it was in a separate bag, maybe. I mean, there are theories that every theory of Tina Barr is ridiculous because we just have no idea. There's not enough evidence for it. All we know about Tina Barr is that that's Cooper's money, period. And we have some scientific testing that's been done that indicates that the money did not get wet in the wintertime, which is when he jumped. There's evidence there's peer-reviewed scientific evidence, analysis done on the money that shows that it has springtime diatoms on it, these microscopic organisms in the Columbia River. So the money did not appear to get wet at the time of the hijacking. So it didn't land in the river that night. I mean, that's science. So come at me, bro, if you don't like the science, but it's peer-reviewed science. So it didn't get wet in the wintertime. And a money bundle is not going to float down the river just on its own. It would have to be contained in something that has some buoyancy to it. So how it got there, who the hell knows? In fact, that's a bigger mystery, almost as big of a mystery as who Cooper is himself. And the joke is that, we have the D.B. Cooper mystery. And if D.B. Cooper's ever solved, we're just going to become the Tina Barr mystery. I like to think that Cooper himself would have no idea how it got there. I imagine Cooper literally just watching the news going, oh, I'll be damned. There's my money if he lost all the money or if he lost some of them or whatever. I don't know. Who knows? But I don't think Cooper knew how it got there himself, be my guess. And I think he might have been surprised when he saw the news of it 9 years later if he was still alive then.
If you were going to hide something you want to find it later, would you hide it in some place in the sand on the side of a river?
No. I remember at CooperCon a couple of years ago when McNally was there, we asked, because remember Mac was going to bury his money if he had kept it. I remember asking Mac that. I said, hey, Mac, we were at a bar. And I said, hey, Mac, would you have buried your money on the side of a half-mile wide river? He goes, no. He goes, no, I wouldn't have done that. What an idiot. Who would have done that? So no, Cooper didn't. I mean, money being found beneath the surface of the sand 9 years later, I mean, less than 30 feet from the shoreline. And the people who owned the property said it was below the high tide line. So indicates that the money washed up there. Now, problem is it just doesn't have the wintertime diatoms on it. So it did not get wet. When did it wash up there, right? It didn't wash up recently because the money was found in February of 1980. February 8th, I think. And so yeah, I don't, yeah, logic says it washed up there. But again, money doesn't float, so it would have been, had to have been in something else. When did it get there? We just don't know. It had been there for a while, though. It was pretty deteriorated, and the rubber bands were pretty much, as soon as he touched them, they fell apart. And so it's bizarre. The whole thing is crazy.
And then also the flight attendants also said he was around 5'9" to 5'10".
Just to pause there. The flight attendants, Tina Mucklow said 5'10" to 6 feet tall in her first interview. In her second interview, she said 6 feet tall. Alice Hancock, stewardess, said 6'1", although she says she never saw him standing up, but she says 6'1". Florence Schaffner, the first flight attendant they dealt with, was in the cockpit handwriting notes as he sat 75 feet behind her. She said 6'1". She later amended it to 6 feet tall. The gate agent who took Cooper's ticket said 6'1" plus. Okay. And the ticket agent who sold him his ticket said 5'10" to 5'11". So, your average is all those people is going to be like 5'11", 6 feet tall. So, I mean, he was taller than the average person. That's what they're saying. And, height estimations generally aren't that far off. I mean, they can be off, but not by 4 or 5 inches. So anybody who's 5'6", 5'7", even 5'8", 5'9", even, I don't think so. It seems a little small to me, considering what the majority of the people who actually saw him standing up said about his height. But, it's all witness descriptions, but it seems like he was taller than they thought. Could have been an optical illusion because of his long coat. I don't know, but they seem to think he was taller than the average person at the time.
They basically some people thought he might be Mexican American or Native American because his little skin tone was a little darker. And that's interesting to me. Because he said Mexico City, some people thought he was from Mexico, but I personally think more likely Native American of some sort or Native Canadian. So, and some a little bit of indigenous stuff going up because they were in the Northwest, Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of indigenous tribes up there and also into Canada. All right. Okay, so 1973, the FBI internally released an 8-page suspect profile. They said they suggested he was a military-trained parachutist. Right away, what is my issue with the FBI saying that? Because we've gone over this. They suspected he was an Air Force veteran, familiar with Seattle and the surrounding areas. What's the problem right here? That I disagree right away with the FBI. Unless he was suicidal. Correct. Fingerprints. Thank you very much. Fingerprints. Yeah. If he was suicidal, he wouldn't give a crap. That's true. So we got to keep the suicide thing in mind, although that's a lot of work to go through to commit suicide. I mean.
Yeah. No.
If he wanted to just get the money, he could have done anything. I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a lot of fancy work and a lot of working to make sure everything. He wanted to make sure he could get the stairs down, to make sure he could jump. It's a lot of stuff he was trying to do that doesn't indicate to me suicide, because there's so many easier ways to commit suicide and screw people over at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, he may have been apathetic about his survival, but I think he would have preferred to survive and live, but he may have not. He may have been to the point where he didn't give a crap anymore. Right. But I mean, it seems like he wanted to pull this off, but I mean, he may not have cared. He may not have cared if he had died, and he may not have cared. I mean, obviously he was willing to risk his life for this. I will say this again. And I guess I disagree with Pat on this. I mean, but she's the expert, but, I have familiarity with criminals myself, having been a former prosecutor and a current defense attorney. I've had thousands, come before me in different, as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney, the idea that someone is going to roll out of bed and be totally nonchalant and comfortable. She talked earlier about his personality, but, the fact that he would be so nonchalant and comfortable threatening people's lives like that, Just imagine yourself rolling out of bed tomorrow morning. I mean, actually imagine yourself climbing out of bed, going to your local airport with a fake bomb or a real bomb and saying, I will blow everybody out of the sky, including myself, if you don't give me money. Okay, this guy was committing armed robbery, kidnapping, extortion, aircraft piracy, and did it without breaking a sweat. I mean, no doubt he was anxious and nervous internally, right? But he did it without too much fuss. He got agitated a few times, but I think we can look at the other hijackers who had no criminal records. McCoy, Hetty, they were nervous. They weren't comfortable putting people in this sort of fear. But Cooper seemed okay doing this. So I just don't, it's hard for me to believe that this was his first rodeo. Okay, I just don't, that sort of, to go from no crime at all to extortion, armed robbery, aircraft piracy, and risking your life for money. I mean, he was risking, it's not so much the parachute escape that was risky, really. I mean, parachutes work. But it was, the FBI could have stormed the plane and blew him away. So, you're risking life imprisonment. I mean, this was a death penalty case. Now, they weren't going to kill him for it, but after a trial if he had been caught. But this was a capital offense at the time. It was no longer hijacking. Very soon afterwards was taken off of capital crimes, but at the time it was a capital crime. I mean, he could have been given the death penalty theoretically. So he's risking a lifetime imprisonment, his liberty, all this stuff for profit. This seems to be a criminal or a very desperate individual. But his nonchalance about this whole thing makes me think he didn't care. I don't know.
He could have jumped without the damn parachute. He could have just chucked the money out the window.
It was a bank robbery.
Anything.
It was a bank robbery.
The suicide thing bothers me because I just don't think. I think he worked too hard to plan this and get away with it.
Yeah, it's a bank robbery. This is a clever bank robbery. The Cooper heist is not that intricate, really. It's not that. We overthink it. It's a clever bank robbery. So generally, in my opinion, if your suspect is not the type to rob a bank, or who would be willing to rob a bank, then he's probably, or for whatever, then he's probably not the hijacker. This is a bank robbery, okay? And he devised a clever way to escape a crime scene by jumping out of your crime scene as your crime scene continues, at 200 miles an hour down toward Reno, right? A very clever thing of him to do. He wanted to live for sure. I think it feels like it. He may have not cared if he died, but I think he definitely wanted to live. And he thought this out enough to where, bank robbers want to live. Bank robbers aren't robbing a bank to commit suicide. They're not doing suicide by cop in a bank robbery generally. They're doing it for profit, and that's what Cooper was doing.
To be committing suicide. And if that's true, then that he left his fingerprints there would indicate to me he did not think those fingerprints could be traced. So I'm a little concerned about that. Cooper's mannerisms. They said he was also very familiar with Tacoma. He noted McCord Air Force Base's proximity to Seattle-Tacoma Airport. He seemed to know things that a civilian wouldn't be aware of. But perhaps if he's in the airline industry, he would be. Don't know. Cooper's mannerisms, such as his vocabulary planning, his thorough retrieval of evidence, his use of aviation terminology, led the FBI to conclude he was not a common criminal. I agree with that. I don't think he was a criminal. I don't think he had a criminal history. I think this was his midlife crisis. 40 years old is midlife crisis time. When you commit mass murder, you commit mass murder when you're a teen or early 20s or when you're midlife. Both times are times in your life where you don't see the future.
And she's saying 40 years old. The estimates was that's young for Cooper. In fact, it was the FBI approximately believed him to be 48 was their age, but the flight attendants all thought mid 40s, 44 to 46 or so. But the gate agent thought 50, another passenger thought 50. The very first document we have describing Cooper was written as he was still, was written with him sitting 75 feet behind her, says in his 50s. So, I mean, he was on the older side of, early middle age, I guess.
So, in other words, if you're a teen who's a complete screw up, you don't see you have a good future. So, what the hell? I'll go shoot up my school. You get to be 40 years old and you know you're not doing well in work. You're about to lose your job. Your workmates don't like you. You think you have no chance of moving up in the world. Maybe you're in financial difficulties. You're 40 years old and think, basically, the rest of my life's going to suck. So, you commit mass murder. This is also the time you commit a hijacking of this sort. All right, so not a common criminal. I agree with that. Cooper was clearly intelligent, yes. Not impulsive or easily rattled. He was very, very calm as he did all of this. A careful and procedure-oriented planner, yes. Adept at anticipating contingencies and adaptive strategies, yes. When he had there were some issues that were going on, he was like, okay. He was irritated, but he dealt with it and moved ahead. Profilers also noted Cooper's ability to quickly and competently adapt to various situations as they arose, indicating he probably preferred to work independently. Maybe. And neither needed nor wanted an accomplice. I agree with that. I don't think he worked with an accomplice.
Yeah.
Cooper's financial situation was probably desperate, according to retired FBI Chief Investigator Ralph Himmelsbach.
Oh.
Extortionists and other criminals who steal large amounts of money nearly always do so because they need it urgently. I don't agree with that. He's smart enough that I believe that he probably could procure work and he wasn't going to be desperate. I don't agree with that at all. I think what he said was he had a grudge. And I think the $200,000 was a grudge for whatever reason. Like, you don't respect me. I didn't get what I should have gotten. Now I'm going to screw you. I think it's more of an emotional thing. He said he wasn't a heavy drinker or an alcoholic. I agree, because he wasn't drinking much on the flight. By calculating the number of cigarettes he smoked throughout the hijacking, the FBI believed Cooper smoked about 1 pack of cigarettes a day. I disagree with that. Only because, just because he smoked cigarettes on the flight didn't mean he was a heavy smoker in regular life. Now, I know this because I've done PI work. And when I've done PI work, I've smoked a shitload of cigarettes. If I'm someplace, I'm going to hang around people, I'm smoking because I'm trying to fit in, because I'm trying to keep busy, whatever. I've done that. I'm not a smoker. If anybody saw me smoking, they would assume I was a smoker. I wasn't a smoker. But I used this, especially sometimes when I was certain places, I knew which cigarettes would be popular in the community. And I would have those cigarettes available that I could share with people and I could hang with people. That he smoked on the flight, was he trying to be cool? Or was he nervous? Or was that just a habit? I just don't know. This is where I would not jump to conclusion.
Yeah, okay, so the thing about Cooper is a couple things. For one, I mean, he smokes 7 cigarettes within about 2.5 hours, which is, Tina Mucklow said he was chain smoking incessantly, and she was a former smoker herself. He actually peer pressured her into taking a cigarette. He asked her if she wanted one, and she said she had quit, and he goes, well, yeah, but I bet you still want one anyway. And, so they shared a cigarette, the flight attendant and Cooper. Another thing too, yeah, Pat, you may have fake smoked, and yeah, people can fake smoke, but you'd want something to drink after you did that to clear your mouth out, no doubt. And Cooper, after his first bourbon and soda, did not have any other drinks. He rejected all refreshments. He may have had a sip of water in the bathroom when he went there after the plane landed, but nothing to wash his mouth out, or his mouth's gonna be pretty nasty and dry. And he denied all refreshments when they were like, "Hey, do you want something to drink?" So I think that that's not dispositive that he was a smoker or not. But why would you do that? I understand that narrows the field. If they're going to say he was definitely a smoker and you're not a smoker, then you can smoke. Maybe, but it seems like the risk of that, you getting sick chain smoking cigarettes, would outweigh the reward of doing this. I don't know, but I think it was. I mean, he's probably a smoker. I mean, he had multiple matchbooks with him, so he was intending to keep smoking. I mean, so he seems like a smoker. And a former smoker was sitting next to him, and she felt he was a chain smoker, she called him. So, and again, and they talked about cigarette smoking, apparently, was one of the things they talked about. So it seems like he was a smoker.
He could be a heavy smoker. He could just be trying to keep busy. He could be nervous. Don't know. Trying to be cool. Have no clue. Next thing. Agents theorized Cooper's alias was based on the adventure hero Dan Cooper, a fictional Royal Canadian Air Force test pilot and the main character of a popular French language Belgian comic book series. One cover which depicted Dan Cooper skydiving. And I want to show you a picture of that. Yes. So one of the things that's interesting about this, I've always pointed out that when you have to come up with a fake name, it's very hard to do. So what you do is you either pick a name from a friend or two friends and put them together. You try to borrow stuff. Or you're standing there and you see a picture of a restaurant, and the restaurant is Bob. So you're like, I'm Bob. That's how you do it. You pick something fictional, you pick something from a movie, but you have to, when you're trying to come up with it, a lot of times you pick something that you see or know, but it's not all that clever. So it's something that's just easy for you to come up with. Here is the picture. This is Dan Cooper, Mysteries. I don't know how you pronounce it. Mystère et secret. I don't know. That's my bad French. I do not speak French. So here he is. He's this airline guy. He's this guy, and he's cool. You know, they think that he picked that from this Dan Cooper thing. Why? Because he's near the Canadian border. So the question is he really Canadian, or was he perhaps working overseas? Maybe in the military is what they think. They speculated the hijacker encountered that comic book thing during a European tour of duty and spoke fluent French. Okay, saying he spoke fluent French is a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah.
Just because you happen to be aware of something doesn't mean you speak fluent French.
It's a comic book too.
Although if he's, did he see it someplace and thought it was a cool cover and that was enough for him? Did he live in Canada, some French-speaking part of Canada in which this was available there? Did he see that on the stands and think, oh, Dan Cooper, wonder what this guy is. Can't read it, but Dan Cooper's a cool name. I don't know. But he used it. Now, it doesn't mean that's actually where he got the name from.
No.
He could have used it he could have found Dan Cooper elsewhere.
Go back to, again, he's a great resource to have. To have a guy who's still alive who did this exact same crime. You go back to Marty McNally, and his alias was Robert Wilson. And I asked him, why did you pick that? He just says, well, it seemed easy for me to remember. Robert Wilson, Robert Wilson, Robert Wilson. If somebody asked me what my name was, I could just say Robert Wilson. So Dan Cooper is pretty easy too. So maybe it was just like that. Other hijackers used aliases George Ames, which is interesting. George Ames sounds like it would be a combination of people he knew, right? Ames is a unique last name. Another hijacker used John Shane as a name. So I don't know, but yeah, Dan Cooper. I'm pretty agnostic on the comic book thing. I mean, it's possible. I mean, because it is pretty on the nose as far as what the comic book's about, aviation and parachuting and things like that. But then again, Dan Cooper is not, Smithers Jehoshaphat. It's not, some really random name, right? It's Dan Cooper. So.
Mucklow said she used the last match in his paper matchbook to light one of his cigarettes, and when she attempted to dispose of the empty matchbook, he demanded she return it to him.
Is she reading the Wikipedia page? That sounds like my writing. Actually. I'm sitting here listening to her saying, that sounds familiar, because I think I wrote that. And I bet that's the Wikipedia page. Because I rewrote that whole section. I had to rewrite most of that damn page. But that sounds like me.
So what was in the matchbook that would give him away? Although he meticulously attempted to retrieve evidence, he left his clip-on tie on the seat. Why did he leave his clip-on tie? Was that a mistake, or did he not give a crap? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe he never thought they were going to analyze the metal on his tie. They just thought it's a cheap penny tie. Nobody gives a crap. Don't know. Okay, so he also is familiar with the 727 capabilities and confidential features, but the 727's design was a primary reason he chose the aircraft. With its aft air stair and the placement of its 3 engines, it was one of the only passenger jets from which a parachute jump could easily be made. Mucklow told the FBI Cooper appeared to be familiar with the refueling time and procedures. That's interesting. By specifying a 15-degree flap setting, he actually told them what he wanted the flaps on the airplane to be. He displayed specific knowledge of aviation tactics and its capabilities of that particular plane. Unlike most commercial jet airliners, the 727 could remain in slow, low-altitude flight without stalling. The flap setting Cooper specifically requested allowed him to control the 727's airspeed and altitude without entering the cockpit, where he could have been overpowered by 3 pilots. He had specific knowledge about flying the aircraft in general. Who the hell knows all this about a Boeing aircraft? Not just some guy who was in the military. They would, just because you're in the military and fly those planes doesn't mean you know a damn thing about Boeing aircraft. He did. So I have to believe he absolutely is connected to Boeing in some way, shape, or form. And I think that's who he was pissed off at, because he said he had that anger, and it wasn't against the airlines itself, because they were just using that particular airline. And so the aircraft, and so were many other airlines. So it had to be Boeing and not the airlines he was pissed at. And he knew too much about Boeing for me to believe he didn't work in some capacity at some point with Boeing.
I just want to interject here about Cooper's knowledge of aircraft. He seems incongruent. Like, he should have known that they could not reach Mexico City. I mean, one of his demands was fly to Mexico City and don't stop to refuel anywhere within the United States. And flying with 15-degree flaps and the gear down, they would have had to have, and they mapped it all out, they were going to have to stop 3 different times to refuel just to get to Mexico City, flying in that configuration, that would reduce the efficiency of the aircraft. Okay, that they were going to have to stop at Reno, Yuma, Arizona, Mazatlan, Mexico, and then go to Mexico City. So how did he not understand that? He didn't seem to understand that. There is also a burning question about what he said to the flight attendant. She is on record stating 2 different things about the air stairs. Number one, she's on record stating that he wanted to take off eventually with the stairs down, completely down eventually. His first demand was to lower them in flight, but then he amended it to, I want the stairs down when we take off. Pilot said we can't do that. Cooper said, yeah, they can. They can do that, but they can lower it from the cockpit later. Okay. Well, 727s can only lower the stairs from the back. Now, C-130s and military aircraft can lower the ramps in the back from the cockpit. So, but this same flight attendant a few days later tells the FBI that Cooper said, when they said we can't take off with the stairs down, Cooper said, yeah, they can, but we can lower it later, like me and you, whatever, the girl. So if we knew exactly which one that was, I mean, if he said the cockpit can lower it, then he didn't know a damn thing about the actual 727s, because he would know that the cockpits can't lower the stairs from the front. But on military aircraft, they did, so that could be a clue that he was just familiar with military aircraft and assumed it worked the same way on a military plane, where the ramps come down from the cockpit controls. So who knows which one it is, but he seems to know things about the plane, but sometimes doesn't know things about the plane. I mean, Cooper smells like a pilot to me, a low-end pilot, maybe not a commercial pilot, but someone who understood aviation a little bit. He was using the lingo that kind of raised the rabbit ears of a few of the pilots to think that he was kind of one of them, maybe. But as far as really knowing the 727, he failed that a few times. And also, may have said that the cockpit can lower it, and that would just kill any 727 knowledge. And again, if you're really familiar with the 727, like if he was a pilot, I mean, you would think that he would know how to lower the stairs. It was a lever in the back. It was like a gear shift on a car, park drive, up, down. I mean, it was just a button. So why he needed the girl back there to help him out to do that, if he really knew the plane, then he could have done it himself. So it's just, he's very incongruent.
I also know this. Let's see what else you know. He appeared to be familiar with parachutes, although his experience level is unknown. That's true. He understood basically about parachutes, but some of them didn't know if he was ever really in the military or as a civilian skydiver. There's some issues about that. There's a lot of argument over how much you knew about the parachutes. A cargo leader, wait a minute. They said that one guy speculated he'd been an Air Force aircraft cargo loader. Again, in the military, I just don't think so because of the fingerprint issue. Cargo loaders have basic training where emergency parachutes know how to dispatch items from planes in flight, but he wouldn't necessarily know how to survive the jump if he did it. So they're thinking maybe he didn't survive, and that's why, because he wasn't truly a parachute guy.
You just land.
How do you say that? A parachutist?
Parachutist.
But he knew enough to be able to jump out of the airplane.
Well, and yeah, I mean, Cooper, I mean, my regular viewers know that I use this analogy a million times. I don't like the ocean. I've never been scuba diving. I'm not going to devise a heist where I could live or die or be imprisoned for life around scuba diving. I'm not familiar with it. Why would I choose scuba diving as my escape if I am not a scuba diver? Now, the problem with that, it's always something, is that Paul Cini, who was the first guy to come up with this idea, unless Cooper had been planning this for a while, but I don't think he was. I think he was a Cini copycat. The FBI thinks so too. But Cini, the guy, the Canadian who got drunk and got hit over the head, this was his idea. Come up with the idea of ransoming the passengers and jumping out with a parachute. Had never even put on a parachute before. I mean, he may have put on the one that he brought with him, but he would never jumped out of a plane before. He went and bought a parachute in Chicago, I think, just for this, and brought it with him. So, yeah, I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth there when I'm saying that it seems that you would never do this if you weren't familiar with it. But the guy who came up with the heist, the OG grandfather of it all, was not a parachutist. So,
okay, so a lot of the FBI agents didn't believe he survived the jump. They thought he lacked real great skydiving experience, lacked the proper equipment for his jump because he couldn't control the parachute that he got. The temperature and inclement weather on the night of the hijacking and the wooded terrain he might have jumped might have just done him in. And in fact, the ransom money was never used that they know of. And I'll get into that because I'll get into it now. It is entirely possible he could have used that money, but not in the United States. Back then, it wasn't computerized. So they had to ask banks to check the numbers. If he went overseas to Russia, to Europe someplace, and exchanged money on the black market or just bought stuff with that cash money, that stuff is going into banks way over there. How it's ever going to get back to the U.S. and be identified? And after a while, nobody gets it. Maybe he waited a couple of years and before he used it. And the banks are like, yeah, we're not going to check every freaking.
I mean, you don't need to go overseas. He could have just gone anywhere outside the Pacific Northwest, right? I mean, the packets of ransom bill, the packets that contain the ransom numbers, which are all numbers on my website, norjack.org. I have one of those things scanned. Those were just sent to banks in the Pacific Northwest, really, and a few in California. So, and again, they're non-sequential numbers. So, I mean, you'd have to go through, manually. It's just not worth it. I mean, really, it's not to check individual dollars. Okay, that's the thing. What these ransom packs really were about was if somebody came in with a bunch of money. Okay, somebody does I think I forget what the term's called, but the banks, it's a suspicious transaction, I guess. Like if you were to come in and pay in cash for something that's $20,000 or whatever, right? In that instance, then they would just check randomly, if one of those was on the ransom list somehow. that's the only time that they would be motivated to do that, to spend the time, the effort to do that. So, but I mean, he could have gone to Mississippi or Florida or Ohio or Arizona. I mean, anywhere, and could have spent that money, and no bank teller is going to look at it or whatever, because they, I mean, the bank tellers, they even have the numbers anyway out there. I mean, this is only sent to the Pacific Northwest, so, and it was a long shot. I mean, we talked to the FBI agent who was one of the original agents last year at CooperCon, and he said, yeah, the money is just a long shot. I mean, we were never really, that was really not really something we were expecting to bear fruit, really. And again, it's easy enough to launder the money anyway. You just go to Vegas and, exchange $1,000 of 20s for poker chips, and then, loiter around the casino for a few minutes, and then go cash out, and you got new money. You got a fresh $1,000 in cash without it being being totally different serial numbers. Okay, so it's not. The FBI knew that was a long shot.
So anyway, they didn't think he had stuff to survive the jump again. Right? Something might have been in the suitcase. I mean, in the briefcase. They do say here they speculated the bag contained items he needed for the jump. Exactly.
So
goggles, gloves.
Yeah, this is my writing. Okay. Yeah, she's doing the Wikipedia page, I think. But she's talking about she's conflating the mystery bag, the paper bag that we don't know what was in it, paper cloth canvas bag, and the briefcase. But that's okay. But yeah, he had an additional bag with him that had items in it. That was about the length of his briefcase and about 4 inches tall. So, I mean, it bulk to it. I mean, something was in there, and who knows, but goggles, gloves, compasses, pistol, boots, maybe. I mean, who knows? But whatever was in there was not used during the hijacking itself in front of anybody. So whatever was in there would have only been used for his escape, because he didn't open it up or anything during the hijacking.
Kind of stuff. Remember, nobody was watching him when he jumped. So he could have put on extra clothing, put on goggles, put on gloves, put on all this stuff.
100%, Pat.
They just don't know.
Nailed it. Yep. We have no idea.
Okay. They don't believe he had an accomplice on the ground. I agree with that, because he didn't have an exact location. He was jumping, and he didn't seem to want to work with people anyway. Okay, so that's basically it on that. I agree on some of that stuff. But my main thing with this guy is, yes, I think he's smart. I think he had to have worked for Boeing at some point. His knowledge is too high. The fact he cared less about his fingerprints, to me, says he was never in the military or in prison. The fact he knew about this Dan Cooper thing.
Just to reiterate, in case you missed it, I mean, she's talking about the fingerprints a lot. And like I said, the only fingerprints found for Cooper were partial. Okay, other fingerprints were whole that they found in the plane, but these were like the 11 partial prints were all found at his seat. So it appears that he obfuscated his fingerprints somehow. And some people say, well, maybe he wiped down his seat, but no, because the palm impression was complete. So if he had wiped his seat down, he would have also wiped off the palm impression. But he wasn't worried about palm impressions, because no one took palm impressions. I mean, even if say this wasn't his thought process. I mean, you're going to cover up your fingerprints, not your palms, because nobody was taking palm prints back then. So, yeah, fingerprints. And like I said, I've never committed a crime. So I'm not on, I mean, I think when I went to law school, they had to take our fingerprints, but like, my fingerprints aren't out there. I mean, even if my fingerprints weren't out there, I would still be smart enough to know that if I was caught some other way, that would just be additional evidence against me. Aha, your fingerprints match. Oh man, so yeah.
Might have put him in Canada, which is right on the border. So he might be Canadian. The reason he might have wanted to jump out soon enough was to get back across the border.
Yeah, and look, I'm not sure if she's going to mention it, but Cooper, man, I mean, I would not be, I mean, at all surprised. I mean, I may even lean toward Cooper being Canadian, because when Cooper asked for his money, he put a qualifier on it of some sort. He either said that he wanted circulated U.S. currency or negotiable American currency. We have this both in the actual records transcripts and things from the flight and stuff. So we don't know, but not from his mouth. So it's a game of telephone. But he either said U.S. currency or American currency. So like, what American would ever say that? You would say, "Give me $200,000, $200,000, 200,000 in cash." I mean, you wouldn't say. Americans are vain. I mean, we're the only people in the world who exist, right? So, you'd say dollars. We wouldn't. But Canadians, particularly Canadians who live in the Pacific Northwest, particularly Vancouver, on the border there, do cross back enough to where they have to specify at times, I want American dollars or Canadian dollars. So that may have been a tell on his part, just a clue that he was saying this. There's no other reason he would say that. I don't know of any other hijackers who would say something so strange. To put a qualifier on it, it may have just been a habit of his. And it's a good clue that he may have been Canadian or foreign of some sort. So I'm just going to end it there, really. She goes into, because I don't want to, it's a long video, but she goes into the suspects from the HBO documentary, and none of those people are Cooper, so it's really not worth talking about. But she goes into that. But anyway, interesting to hear from a criminal profiler about this. I mean, obviously she's got decades of experience, but again, it's one of these things where you don't know what you don't know, and I think that there are some things that if she had known the details about, that it may have changed her opinion on that. I'd love to talk to her sometime, but she's got other things going on, of course, and Cooper stuff is small potatoes to most people. But I agreed with some of her and some of her stuff and not all of it, but it's hard to, Cooper is a hard person to profile. He just has he's a Rorschach test, essentially. You can make him anything you want him to be, because and have evidence to back it up. I mean, there's evidence that he's stupid. There's evidence that he's smart. There's evidence that he was careless. There's evidence that he was meticulous. Evidence that he was planned. Evidence that he was haphazard at the same time. I mean, he is all over the place. Profiling this guy, I mean, some of his knowledge is well sourced, and some of the things he said was wrong, flat out wrong. So his knowledge is really all over the place, and his behavior is unique. And so he's just an odd guy. I think she used the word peculiar early on, and that's really what Cooper is. The guy is just peculiar. So anyways, good video, Pat. I enjoyed watching that. You seem like a real sweetheart. I'm glad to make your acquaintance there and do a review. So I enjoyed it. So nothing, like I said, you don't know what you don't know, but yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, that's all I've got for today, folks. So like and subscribe and all that YouTube-y stuff, and I will talk to you guys again next time. Bye.